Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Before we dive into this story, make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more heart-gripping tales that will leave you inspired. I never thought the man I once loved so deeply would become the reason I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. When I met Nathan, I was a 24-year-old woman from a modest neighborhood, working as a receptionist in a small real estate agency. He was the charming, polished CEO of a construction company that seemed to own half the city skyline. Nathan walked into my life like a dream I was convinced had been crafted just for me. His words were smooth, his attention felt rare, and his promises seemed unshakable. When he proposed after only a year of dating, I thought my fairy tale had begun. Our wedding was nothing short of extravagant white roses lining the aisle, a shimmering chandelier casting golden light over our vows, and every influential figure in the city in attendance. I wore the gown of my dreams, feeling like a queen beside the man I believed would protect and cherish me forever. But life behind closed doors was nothing like the fairy tale I imagined. We wanted children, but month after month, year after year, I found myself staring at negative pregnancy tests. At first, Nathan held me, whispered that it didn't matter, that we had each other. But over time, those comforting words dried up. 3 years into our marriage, the man who once promised to carry me through every storm began avoiding me. His patience thinned. His words turned sharp. "Maybe this just isn't meant to be," he would mutter after another failed fertility appointment, as though I were a disappointment he couldn't shake. I cried myself to sleep more times than I could count, praying for a miracle not just for a child, but for the love we once shared to return. Then, one rainy afternoon, my prayers seemed to be answered. I stood in our bathroom, clutching a test with trembling hands as the word pregnant appeared in bold letters. I laughed and sobbed all at once, my knees weak as I pictured Nathan lifting me in joy, kissing my forehead, whispering that this was our fresh start. I cooked his favorite dinner, set the table with candles, and waited for him to walk through the door. But when I told him, his face didn't light up. Instead, he stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. "You're pregnant?" he asked flatly, his tone unreadable. "Yes," I said, holding my breath. He leaned back in his chair, and a smirk cold and unfamiliar curled his lips. "That's not possible. And even if it is, Isabella, do you really think this changes anything? You and I, we're done." The words hit harder than any physical blow. "What do you mean we're done?" I whispered, my voice cracking. He didn't look away. "You're beneath me, Isabella. Always have been. I found someone who matches my world, my status. Someone who can actually give me what I deserve." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think I haven't given you everything? I've stood by you through everything, Nathan. I've sacrificed." He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Pack your things. I want you out by tomorrow. And don't think for a second you're dragging me into some drama about that child. It's not mine." I sat there, stunned, the man I'd loved for years suddenly feeling like a stranger. My hands instinctively went to my stomach. I didn't know what to say, so I simply left the table, my mind reeling. That night, I barely slept. In the morning, a moving crew showed up not to help me, but to throw my belongings into boxes and dump them into the rain outside. Nathan stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching without a shred of remorse. I had no family nearby. My parents had passed years earlier, and my only sibling lived abroad. I spent that night in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had unraveled so quickly. My savings were small, my job gone, and my body carrying a child or children I now had to protect with everything I had. The weight of fear pressed heavily against my chest. But beneath that fear, something else began to stir, a stubborn, quiet resolve. The months that followed tested me in ways I never imagined. Pregnancy alone was hard enough, but doing it while juggling 2 part-time jobs was nearly impossible. My feet ached from standing long hours as a cashier, and my back burned after late-night cleaning shifts in an office building. Some days, I barely ate so I could afford prenatal vitamins and pay for doctor visits. People stared at my growing belly, some offering pity, others silent judgment. But I kept moving forward, one step at a time. One cold winter night, I went into labor unexpectedly. I had no one to call but a neighbor from the small apartment complex I'd managed to rent. She drove me to the hospital, where after hours of pain and exhaustion, I heard the first cries of my sons Liam and Ethan, twins. The sight of their tiny faces erased every moment of doubt and despair. They were mine, and I would move mountains for them. But life after their birth was anything but easy. Sleepless nights bled into long days of work. I sometimes fed them with one hand while stirring a pot of soup for the small catering orders I'd begun to take on the side. Cooking had always been my comfort, and little by little, I realized it could be my way out. I started small meals for local church events, boxed lunches for office workers. I called it Isabella's Kitchen, scrawling the name in black marker on homemade labels. It was slow at first, but word spread. My food wasn't just filling, it was made with care, with the kind of flavors that reminded people of home. Within a year, I was making enough to quit one of my part-time jobs. I moved us into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, where Liam and Ethan could play outside without me worrying every second. I watched them grow polite, curious, and strong. Every time they smiled, I knew I was doing something right. Even though Nathan's shadow loomed in my memories, I refused to let bitterness take my joy. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if he ever thought about me or the children he had denied. I didn't need his money or his acknowledgement anymore, but a part of me wanted him to see what he had thrown away. Little did I know, life was about to hand me that opportunity on a silver platter, and I would take it without hesitation. Success didn't come to me overnight. Every step forward was built on exhaustion, late nights, and sacrifices that no one saw but me. Isabella's Kitchen started as a survival plan, but over time, it became my passion. I poured my heart into every dish, not just for my customers, but for Liam and Ethan. I wanted them to know that even when life tries to bury you, you can grow into something stronger than before. My boys were my daily motivation. They would sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I kneaded dough or chopped vegetables. Sometimes they'd try to help, their little hands clumsy but eager. "Mama, can I stir?" Ethan would ask, already holding the spoon. Liam, always the careful one, would check my ingredient list and say, "You forgot the parsley, Mama." I would laugh and let them feel like part of the business, because in truth, they were. Without them, I would have given up long ago. 2 years after starting Isabella's Kitchen, I landed my first big contract catering a corporate luncheon for a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. I remember standing in that sleek conference room, trays of my food laid out on white tablecloths, as people in suits complimented every bite. That day, I walked away not just with payment, but with confidence. It was the first time I truly believed I could build something lasting. Word of mouth became my greatest marketing tool. One happy client led to another, and soon I was booked weeks in advance. I upgraded my equipment, rented a small commercial kitchen, and even hired 2 assistants, single mothers like me who needed a chance. Helping them reminded me that I wasn't just building a business, I was building a community. Liam and Ethan thrived alongside me. I saved enough to enroll them in a reputable private school, determined to give them the kind of education I never had. At first, I worried they'd feel out of place among children from wealthier families, but my fears were unfounded. They made friends easily, and their manners and confidence turned heads. Teachers praised their discipline, unaware that it came from years of watching their mother fight for every inch of progress. The turning point came when a well-known lifestyle magazine featured Isabella's Kitchen in an article about hidden culinary gems of the city. The photos of my vibrant dishes and the heartfelt interview about my journey struck a chord with readers. Within days, my phone was ringing nonstop. My small kitchen couldn't keep up, so I took the biggest risk of my life. I leased a storefront in a busy commercial district. The grand opening felt surreal. Friends, clients, and neighbors came to show support. The smell of fresh bread filled the air as people lined up outside. My name, Isabella's Kitchen, shone in bold letters above the entrance, a symbol of how far I had come. I didn't have to say it out loud, but deep inside, I thought, look at me now, Nathan. I rarely thought about him in those years. I heard bits and pieces. He was still running his company, still flaunting his wealth, and had a reputation for dating women who fit the CEO's arm candy image. I never heard him mention marriage again, and I didn't care. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But then, on a warm spring afternoon, an ivory envelope arrived in my mailbox with elegant gold lettering. It was an invitation. Mr. Nathan Everett and Miss Clarissa Hayes request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I stared at the card, my fingers tightening around it. At first, I laughed in disbelief. After all these years, he wanted me to attend his wedding? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became this wasn't about kindness. Nathan wanted me to see him at his peak, surrounded by luxury, marrying a woman who, in his eyes, matched his status. He probably pictured me walking in, alone, in a simple dress, reminded of what I had lost. He didn't know I had built an empire of my own. That night, I called Liam and Ethan into the living room. "Boys," I said, holding up the invitation, "I think we've just been invited to a show." They exchanged puzzled glances. "A wedding?" Ethan asked. "Not just any wedding," I replied. "Your father's." The word hung heavy in the air. They knew of Nathan, knew that he had denied them, but they had never met him. I'd always been honest about our past without poisoning their hearts. "So, are we going?" Liam asked carefully. I smiled, but it wasn't my usual warm smile. "Yes, and we're going to show him exactly what he threw away." From that moment, I began planning not just my outfit, but our entire presence. The boys would wear tailored suits, polished shoes, and the quiet confidence I had taught them. I would walk in with my head high, wearing a gown that said, "I am not the woman you left behind." I wanted him to see that the woman he thought would crumble had built a life that eclipsed his shallow idea of success. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I noticed a shift in myself. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. Ready to walk into that room, not for revenge, but for closure. Still, I couldn't deny the small, guilty thrill of imagining the look on his face when he saw me and the sons he had pretended didn't exist. When the day arrived, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the deep emerald silk of my dress. My hair fell in soft waves, my makeup flawless. Liam and Ethan emerged from their room, looking like young gentlemen far beyond their years. "Mama," Ethan said with a grin, "I think we're going to win this wedding." I laughed, my heart swelling with pride. We stepped out into the bright afternoon, the sun warm on our faces. I had no idea exactly how the day would unfold, but one thing was certain: I wasn't the same woman Nathan had discarded. I was stronger, wiser, and I was walking into his world on my own terms. The venue was every bit as extravagant as I expected. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. Uniformed waiters moved quietly between guests carrying silver trays of champagne. The kind of event where appearances mattered more than sincerity, exactly Nathan's kind of world. We walked in together, the boys flanking me like two silent pillars of strength. Heads turned almost instantly. I saw women glance at my dress, at Liam and Ethan's polished appearance, then back at me with curiosity. Whispers floated through the air, carrying on the hum of the string quartet. Nathan was across the room, deep in conversation with a group of businessmen. When his eyes landed on me, the change in his expression was almost comical. His confident smile faltered, replaced by something sharp surprise, maybe even a flicker of unease. He wasn't expecting this. "Isabella," he said when he finally approached, his tone trying to mimic the warmth of old times, but landing somewhere between forced and strained. "You look different." "I suppose I am different," I replied evenly, my gaze steady. Liam and Ethan stood beside me, their postures straight, their eyes meeting his without flinching. He glanced at them briefly, and I could almost see the calculation behind his eyes as he realized exactly who they were. Before he could say anything, a tall woman in a fitted white gown joined him, Clarissa. She was striking, her smile polished, her eyes sizing me up with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. "And who might you be?" she asked, her voice dripping with the kind of politeness that was more about control than kindness. "I'm Isabella Everett," I said clearly, watching as her expression flickered at the sound of his last name. "And these," I added, placing a hand gently on Liam's shoulder, "are my sons, Liam and Ethan." Clarissa's smile froze. Nathan cleared his throat. There he began, but I cut him off smoothly. "They're Nathan's children. Though, to be fair, he's never met them until this very moment." The nearby guests, who had been pretending not to listen, went utterly still. The hum of quiet chatter in the surrounding area dimmed. Clarissa blinked. "Is that true?" she asked Nathan, her voice sharp now. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and tried to recover. "This isn't the time or place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time and place," I said, my voice calm but carrying enough weight to draw attention from even further across the room. "You see, years ago, when I told Nathan I was pregnant, he told me I was beneath him. He said the child wasn't his. He threw me out of our home with nothing. I had to start over from scratch while carrying not one, but two babies." Gasps rippled through the room. One older man shook his head. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. Clarissa's eyes narrowed, and she stepped slightly away from Nathan. I continued, not raising my voice, but letting each word land. "I built my business, Isabella's Kitchen, while raising these boys alone. And now we stand here, not because we need anything from him, but because I wanted him to see that the woman he dismissed is not only standing, she's thriving." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Nathan's jaw clenched. "You came here to humiliate me," he accused, his voice low. I met his glare without flinching. "No, Nathan. I came here to show you the truth. The humiliation that's just the natural consequence of your own choices." Before he could respond, a voice from the crowd spoke up. "Isabella's Kitchen? I know that place, it's in the magazine. She's a star in the culinary world now." Heads nodded, and murmurs of recognition spread quickly. People turned their eyes from me to Nathan, the shift in respect painfully obvious. Clarissa's lips tightened into a thin line. She whispered something to him, her eyes hard, before turning and walking away. A few moments later, I saw her speaking to her bridesmaids, her face pale and her movements sharp. Then, as though a decision had been made, she removed the diamond ring from her finger and placed it on the nearest table before leaving the room altogether. Nathan's face drained of color. One of the businessmen he'd been talking to earlier gave him a look of pure disgust. "I don't do business with men who abandon their own," the man said flatly before walking away. One by one, others followed, some shaking their heads, others avoiding his gaze entirely. I didn't need to stay to see the rest. I turned to Liam and Ethan. "Boys, I think it's time we go." They both nodded, and we walked toward the exit, the sound of hushed voices following us. Outside, the evening air was cool and refreshing, like a long-awaited release. Liam looked at me, his expression thoughtful. "Mama, do you feel better now?" I smiled softly. "It's not about feeling better. It's about knowing we're living our lives with integrity, no matter what anyone else does." In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Clarissa had called off the wedding entirely. Nathan's company lost several major contracts. His once glittering social circle seemed to evaporate overnight. Meanwhile, Isabella's Kitchen experienced its busiest season yet. Clients booked months in advance, interviews poured in, and I even began planning a second location. I never spoke to Nathan again. I didn't need to. The boys grew into fine young men, each carving his own path with kindness and determination. And every now and then, when I passed the gold-lettered sign of my business, I thought back to that night, to the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I didn't just survive what Nathan did to me. I turned it into the foundation for something better than I could have imagined. And that, I realized, was the greatest lesson of all. Moral lesson. Life has a way of turning pain into power if you refuse to let it break you. Sometimes, the people who try to bury you are the very reason you grow stronger. I learned that real success isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about building a life so full, so rich, and so meaningful that the opinions of those who hurt you no longer matter. If you're going through a season of loss, remember this. Every setback can be the seed of your greatest comeback. You don't need their approval to rise. You don't need their presence to succeed. All you need is the courage to start again and the determination to keep going when it feels impossible. So keep your head high, focus on your own growth, and one day, you'll look back not with anger, but with pride. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and leave a comment about the lesson that stood out to you most. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life.